Good evening. I'm Heather Stark. Welcome to the first annual banquet for Citizens Alliance for Property Rights.
Hi, my name is Steve Hammond, and I'm the president of Citizens Alliance for Property Rights. This organization began in an auction barn, realizing that politicians respect nothing but political power, and realizing that property owners had largely been individuals fighting individual battles for a long time. The late Kent Pullen, Ron Mariotti, and myself sought to pull together a small group of people to see if we couldn't organize, band together, and gather some political clout in terms of fighting back for the rights of those who own property. Hoping to have perhaps 20 to 25 people in attendance, we were blown away the first night when over 100 people showed up in that barn in order to be able to hear about what we were going to do. Most of those folks left their names and addresses, and many of them left donations to get us started. That was the beginning of the Political Rights Political Action Committee, now known as Citizens Alliance for Property Rights. We hope that you will understand that property does not actually have rights per se. When we talk about property rights, we're really saying the civil rights of a property owner. That is, our founding fathers recognized that it was the right to own property that was the basis of freedom. It was the right to own property that kept us free and away from tyranny. That is, the right to own property is the basis of all of our liberties, and it's a very important right to protect. Currently, policy allows us to see that central planners who neither own nor pay for property are able to control the use of property. Our organization fights for the little guy. Our organization wants the person who is paying the bill, owning the property, and has a personal investment in that property to be able to own, use, and control that property. Unfortunately, many today think that those who are in central positions of power are in a much better position to be able to look out for the rights and interests of others. This simply isn't so. Current policy, now known as smart growth, allows that an imaginary line known as a growth boundary allows those who are within inside that boundary to develop and use their property to its full potential, while denying those who live on the other side of that imaginary line the same right. Like the civil rights movement of the 1960s, the majority is definitely in control of the minority. And Citizens Alliance for Property Rights is doing all we can to rectify this wrong and to realize that the minority should be allowed the same rights as the majority. Thank you for taking time to see this video. Thank you for taking time to look over what we're doing. And I hope you'll be very much a part of this organization and allow us to count you as one of our partners and allies.
Rodney McFarland is a past president of Citizens Alliance. He's a landowner residing in May Valley. He serves as treasurer for our legal fund and has been active in property rights for many years.
Citizens Alliance for Property Rights was born in an era of extreme regulatory takings and eminent domain abuse. Control of private land via regulation instead of purchase via eminent domain blossomed in the early 1970s with the Federal Clean Water Act and Endangered Species Act and the State Shoreline Management Act. 1983 brought the State Environmental Policy Act. 1986 brought King County the Surface Water Management Division with its tax and host of bureaucrats devoted to regulating the properties in unincorporated King County. 1989 brought unincorporated King County the Sensitive Areas Ordinance with its draconian regulations. 1990 moved those same draconian regulations to the rest of the state and cities under the auspices of the State Growth Management Act. 2001 brought the state forest and fish rules to kill off what small timber operators the spotted owl had missed. On December 10, 2002, a new critical areas ordinance was proposed for King County. It called for several new types of critical areas with massive buffers around each. Any permitted development in the rural area would require the set-aside of 65% of the property as native vegetation. Maximum impervious area would be 10%. In March of 2003, a meeting attended by over 100 people was held in the Livestock Sales Pavilion in Enumclaw. It was called by Ron Mariotti and Steve Hammond so that this man, King County Councilman Kent Pullen, could tell the audience of his dream of a political action committee to support and defend property rights. Any right is only as strong as those who defend it. Councilman Pullen explained that those who benefit from weak property rights are well organized and funded. He stated that those wishing strong property rights needed to also be organized and well funded. Everyone decided that Ron Mariotti would pass his hat, and the amount so obtained would determine if there was enough support to start such a PAC. Nearly $5,000 ended up in the hat. A week later, over 20 volunteers showed up to organize and form the new PAC. It was decided to form a nonprofit corporation, and officers and directors were elected. The name of the original organization was Property Rights Political Action Committee. On April 14, 2003, Kent Pullen died and the fight was on for his council seat. We were successful in getting our president, Steve Hammond, appointed to his seat, and Steve won the next election for that seat. Mr. Hammond resigned as president to vote full-time to the King County Council and was replaced by Kim Blake, who was president until September 2003. When she resigned, Rodney McFarland became president and continued until Steve was once again elected in 2007. In January of 2004, the name of the organization was changed to Citizens Alliance for Property Rights to better reflect the mission and policy statements that had been developed to guide the organization. 2003 and 2004 were devoted to building the organization, raising money, and modifying the proposed King County CAO. Public meetings featured speakers such as Washington Supreme Court Justice Richard Sanders and candidate for governor Dino Rossi. CAPR paid for independent scientific review of the best available science used by King County to support their proposed CAO. The group also prepared and submitted 211 pages of written testimony in addition to the report on the science. Officers and members attended and testified at every hearing of the CAO, including the 7 months of weekly hearings at the Growth Management Subcommittee. The CAO ordinances that finally passed 7-6 along strict party lines were different from the proposed ordinances in some significant ways. Buffers did not significantly increase in the urban unincorporated areas. The 35% clearing limit was increased to as much as 50% for 5-acre and smaller lots. The 10% impervious limit was defeated entirely. Farm plans and rural stewardship plans became flexible ways around the one-size-fits-all original regulations. Despite the favorable changes CAPR helped achieve, the overall CAO was still felt to be outrageous. CAPR led a petition drive that gathered 18,000 signatures to force a referendum vote on the ordinance by the voters of unincorporated King County, as provided for by the King County Charter. That effort was blocked by a lawsuit by King County prosecutor Norm Mailing. We fought all the way to the Washington Supreme Court, but were unable to force a vote of the people. Much of 2006 was consumed helping the Washington Farm Bureau promote Initiative 933. Signatures were gathered and rallies were held. Even though our opponents outspent 933 supporters by 3-1, 839,992 Washington voters wanted property fairness. Unfortunately, 1,199,000 of their neighbors voted to continue taking property without compensation. We only need to change the mind of 10% of the voters, and we can reverse course in this state. Government at all levels brings new people to our cause every day with their outrageous actions. We just need to get our message to those new people.
Preston Drew is a rural landowner living near Carnation in East King County. He currently serves as Vice President of Citizens Alliance for Property Rights.
Citizens Alliance is organized as three separate entities: an umbrella membership organization, a political action committee, and a legal fund, which is a 501c3 qualified organization. CAPR chapters now exist in 3 counties: Jefferson, King, and San Juan. There are current efforts and commitments to establish 2 more in Pierce and Island counties. In addition to our chapters, we are formally affiliated with Kitsap Alliance of Property Owners in Kitsap County. Other like-minded organizations interested in the protection of property rights include Washington Farm Bureau. Citizens Alliance worked closely with the state office as well as several county chapters during the Initiative 933 campaign. Citizens Alliance has been talking with Evergreen Freedom Foundation as they contemplate establishing a property rights center along with their other activities. Pacific Legal Foundation is a public interest law firm that litigates nationally issues including property rights with particular emphasis on regulatory takings. Institute for Justice is also a public interest law firm that litigates nationally issues including property rights with particular emphasis on eminent domain cases. Citizens Alliance sent a representative to Washington, D.C. to support IJ during Senate hearings concerning a bill addressing the Kelo Supreme Court case. Suzette Kelo had her house and property taken for the benefit of a private developer. When the U.S. Supreme Court allowed the eminent domain taking, it caused a nationwide firestorm and put the spotlight firmly on eminent domain abuse. Olympic Stewardship Foundation is based in Jefferson County. The organization emphasizes problem solving by bringing together scientific, political, and legal disciplines as they apply to local land use issues. They are currently working on the Jefferson County CAO and in-stream flow and other water-related issues. The template they are developing could have statewide property rights ramifications. National Association of Rural Landowners is based in Washington State, functions as a catalyst for rural landowners wishing to organize at the national level. Citizens Alliance chapters, affiliates, and like-minded organizations are building an effective statewide coalition to battle the never-ending assault on our property rights. Citizens Alliance members frequently comment publicly on property rights on radio talk shows and letters to the editor and in guest editorials. The Citizens Alliance Political Action Committee interviews candidates who seek our endorsement. We also doorbell and contribute financially to strong property rights candidates. Our most significant political activity by far has been signature gathering for initiative and referendum. We are not shy about organizing protests and demonstrations when called for. Citizens Alliance established an advocate program in 2006 in response to numerous requests for help dealing with King County code enforcement. Steve Hammond heads up the program. Landowners can get advice about how best to resolve their situation. One of our first success stories concerned a burned barn. The landowner could not get a permit to rebuild due to critical area buffers. Our advocate simply reminded county officials of promises made during policy debates that existing buildings in these areas could be rebuilt as long as their original footprints were not expanded. The landowners had the permit within days, case closed. CAPR has obtained all the videos of the Growth Management Committee hearings prior to the CAO passage in case details are conveniently forgotten in the future. Another success concerned alleged illegal land clearing. Clearing and grading violations comprise the bulk of code cases. The county thought this was clearing. The CAPR advocate provided these photos documenting a true land clearing operation. The contrast helped establish that the landowner was simply maintaining her property to reasonable standards and no critical areas were violated. The case was dropped.
Bob Voss is a farmer who owns property on the Enumclaw Plateau. He serves on the Washington State Agricultural Commission as well as the King County Conservation District. He is president of Citizens Alliance for Property Rights Legal Fund.
A basic issue is government mindset. Regulatory language for farms has changed from sensitive areas to critical areas to now legacy areas. If the government can convince people that your property is their legacy, that's going to destroy property rights and good science and probably even reason itself. Another issue is bureaucracy. My wife and I spent $5,000 here doing a 300-foot stream improvement and flood control project. Public agencies spent 10 times that amount and took a year and a half to approve the design exactly as I had proposed it. That money could have been used to accomplish 10 similar projects.
The most significant property rights issue for private forest landowners today are no-touch stream buffers mandated by the 2001 Forest and Fish Law. These buffers take up to 200 feet on each side of the stream. The impact on private owners, both from a regulatory and from an economic standpoint, is again bringing into play the law of unintended consequences. More and more owners, especially those in the gentrifying counties around Puget Sound, are converting forest land into other uses, mainly residential development. This property, located in lower elevation south Snohomish County, was first logged around the turn of the century. The second growth was cut about 1955. It is today being cut for the third time. The landowner has owned this property for 50 years. He will lose significant land, timber, and revenue to stream buffers, some of which have no water in them 9 or more months of the year. During policy debates before the Forest and Fish Law was passed, it was promised that large buffers were not going to be mandated for low-grade streams that are mostly dry ditches. As applied, the law takes vast amounts of property with little fisheries benefit. Suburban homes border this parcel. When regulations hinder economical timber production, forest gives way to houses.
Scott Schock works as an environmental consultant. He lives in Seattle. He represents a new direction for Citizens Alliance. We are expanding our focus to include more urban and suburban issues such as eminent domain abuse, urban density, and business property rights. Scott serves on the Citizens Alliance board.
In our legal case challenging the King County's Critical Areas Ordinance, we initially lost in the trial court. However, with our team at Pacific Legal Foundation, we appealed the case based on a technical aspect of the legal concept of nexus and proportionality. And on January 23rd of this year, the Washington State Court of Appeals heard the oral arguments on this facial constitutional challenge to the King County CAO. Stay tuned for more on this case. Our keynote speaker tonight, Washington's own Attorney General Rob McKenna, has put together a task force dealing with the issue of eminent domain abuse. Many of the names on this task force are familiar to us. Our president, Steve Hammond, has been invited to be a participant. The formation of this task force speaks to the importance of the issue. We will work to ensure that solid recommendations and actions result. Citizens Alliance Vice President Preston Drew and Cascade Land Conservancy Vice President Michelle Connor have held a series of meetings to discuss issues in an attempt to find common ground. Cascade Land Conservancy advocates quasi-market strategies to conserve certain lands. They recognize that property rights are an important factor in their negotiations. Talks will be continuing. The people living in urban and suburban areas within the urban growth boundary are becoming aware of the density downside of growth management regulations. Most folks didn't notice the catastrophic losses to rural area landowners by the imposition of the current regulatory scheme. However, they are noticing the effect of cramming the majority of growth into relatively small urban areas. Large new houses, apartments, and condos next to small older ones are also creating character conflicts. In an attempt to preserve rural character through downzoning regulations, the character of our cities and towns is suffering. 1 week after the failure of Initiative 933, a King County city downzoned 300 business properties. The owners lost an estimated $10 million in value. This would not have happened under I-933 without triggering compensation. If we had raised another $1 million during the campaign, and we would have advertised on TV and passed the initiative. So it's important that we get increased business support of Citizens Alliance to help dramatically expand our ability to preserve property rights for all citizens of this state. Citizens Alliance will continue to lobby lawmakers and support strong property rights candidates for office. We will advocate for property rights in King County and Washington State.